While the country has seen a rise in unstable coalitions at local government level, Deputy President Paul Mashatile maintains that government's response must focus on the well-being of its people. Mashatile made these remarks at the National Dialogue on Coalition Governments currently underway in Cape Town.
Government is a matter of national interest. Properly handled, it has the potential to bring the necessary stability, especially to the local government sphere, despite the intemperance we have witnessed in relation to coalitions. So, Program Directors, these dialogues therefore seek to promote fidelity to the national interest so that we remain focused on the fulfillment of our constitutional injunction, which is to build a united, democratic, non-racial, non-sexist and prosperous South Africa. Lack of skills, inadequate revenue, indifference from both administrators and politicians, and the substitution of the public good with self-interest. The document also makes an important point whose nuances must be kept in mind throughout our discussions this weekend.
We understand that the African Transformation Movement has walked out of the National Dialogue on Coalition Governments. The party says the ANC and the DA are sidelining the so-called smaller parties. Vuyo Zungula is the ATM leader and joins me now via our video link. Mr. Zungula, good evening to you. Just walk us through your reason to walk out of this national dialogue.
Firstly, Hugo, a dialogue needs to be approached with an open mind, with principles and the interests of the people. Not a case whereby a liberation movement that knows that it is going to receive less than 50% of the vote next year now tries to trick parties in parliament into taking part in a sham of a dialogue whereby there's already agreement, because some of the parties went there thinking that they are going to be discussing on a fresh scale with the ANC in order to pave the way for the future of coalitions, only to find out that there is a bill already that the cabinet or the minister of COGTA has already agreed that it's going to regulate the issue of coalitions. We at ATM felt that there are two proposals that they put forward as the ANC and the DA that are unconstitutional and undermine the will of South Africans, when they are saying, number one, there needs to be a limit in terms of the votes of no confidence against the executive. We view that as a violation of Section 102 of the Constitution, and we could not allow ourselves to sit in a dialogue that promotes such violations of the Constitution. The second one, which is a clear attempt by the ANC to remain in power, is when they are proposing that a party with the highest number of votes, if they are less than 50%, must be the ones that lead the coalition. We view that as a violation of Section 86 of the Constitution, because any member of parliament, whether they belong to a party with 1 seat or 300 seats, must be allowed to actually be nominated to stand for the president, not as a case whereby the ANC wants to use a backdoor approach in order to remain in power. So based on that, we felt that we are not going to stay there, particularly because they also undertook a study tour with some parties that are not even in parliament to learn about coalition government in Europe. And they want to influence those discussions based on a process that was excluding other parties. And also there's this unfortunate reality that even in the dialogue today, there were parties that have never contested even single election, not representing anyone. Those parties were allowed to participate there, whereas parties that are elected representatives of the people were not given enough space to participate in the dialogue. So we felt as the ATM, we cannot sit in such a shame of a dialogue, an exercise whereby they're just ticking a box because they've already decided between themselves and the DA.
Mr. Zungula, had you expressed your views at the time prior to you walking out?
Look, we went there, we expressed our views in complete, and we decided that we are not going to stay because even the facilitators, it is pro-ANC people. You've got facilitators for some of the commissions, which are ANC members. You've got some facilitators who are basically people who are known to be pro-ANC, meaning that entire dialogue is not a dialogue that is set out to hear the diverse views of parties. Rather, it is a scheme by the ANC to remain in power by hook or crook, which is something that all liberation movements, and they know that they are going to be out of power, they try to use politics or force in order to remain in power. In this case, the ANC is using politics by tricking people to think that there is a genuine dialogue, whereas they've already decided, because even the speakers that were there, the facilitators, they wanted to condition the minds of the participants towards these proposals of theirs, which are unconstitutional.
Now, you expressed concerns about the proposed threshold for participation in a coalition, stating that it is, in your words, I think, nonsensical and violates the Constitution. Can you explain why you believe the threshold proposal is unconstitutional and how it may impact these smaller parties?
Look, our Constitution allows for a multi-party democracy system. Now, to have a multi-party democratic system, you will understand that the people that vote there, even if it's a minority, but they elect someone to represent them in the councils or legislatures to represent those minorities. Now, in accordance to their proposals as the ANC, that they want, a certain threshold, I think it is 1% of a party to be represented in the legislatures and also to participate in some of the coalitions. We believe that that takes away what the Constitution and the spirit of the Constitution when it wants a multi-party democracy system, as well as accommodating the diverse voices in terms of the people that are elected to represent people. So in that context, we view that that particular proposal, not only does it undermine Section 86 of the Constitution, it undermines the spirit of the Constitution because it will now make the so-called bigger parties to basically eat away some of the support of the small parties. And in other words, we are going to have few parties which are predominantly funded by the very same players maintaining their stranglehold over the governance of our country. And you are going to limit the other voices, which is the so-called smaller parties, from participating and being involved in the governance of our country.
Now, Mr. Zungula, you've stated that you feel sidelined, certainly by the utterances, or when you listen to the ANC and the DA, based on this afternoon's meeting. And you've also said that it is time to start beating about the bush and address the glaring instabilities that have plagued our municipalities that are governed through a coalition. And it's been argued that the smaller parties are the reason for the breakup of these coalitions. Now, you disagree. Can you tell us why?
Look, Hugo, these big so-called big parties are always wanting to scapegoat the so-called smaller parties as the reason why there's instabilities in coalitions. Whereas it is the so-called big parties, the ANC and their sister party, the DA, that always push for motions of no-confidence, that always wants to change people around. So we believe as the ATM that the root causes of the problems of instability in our municipalities, it is the self-interest of the DA and the ANC, because it is them that put ahead their own selfish needs of wanting to be corrupt, of wanting to have nepotism in terms of the appointment of people, instead of putting the interests of the people first. The smaller parties have always proven that they always pursue service delivery and public service over their selfish interests. Now, we believe as the ATM that now the narrative that is being driven out there is that we have unstable coalitions and it is a result of smaller parties, whereas nothing could be further from the truth. The truth is, it is the so-called big parties who are using their personal interests, their selfish interests, to triumph over the interests of the people. That is why we've got this problem.
Now, Mr. Zungula, in your view, how can the national dialogue on coalition governments be improved to address your concerns and certainly the concerns of other smaller parties?
Look, it needs to be principle-driven, whereby we are principled. There's also mutual respect, and the anchoring guide is that everything that is done, it is not to maintain a dominance of certain parties. Rather, we need to approach a dialogue putting the interests of the people first. The people must always be central to each and every dialogue that is there concerning governance, because without the people, there is no governance. Number two, there needs to be dialogue that is there in good faith. In other words, you are not going to have an organization or the DA and the ANC that is going to go there and, put proposals only to find out they've already snuck in a bill that they want to push, that before the elections next year, this bill must be passed so that they are able to remain in power next year. We need to have a discussion that is done in good faith, because we are concerned about the interests of the people, not the interest of maintaining the dominance of these parties that have done nothing for the people of our country.
Now, finally, Mr. Zungula, the issue of limiting the number of votes of no confidence that can be called was raised. Can you explain why you view this proposal as a threat to holding the government accountable and how it may impact the checks and balances within a coalition government?
It is very hypocritical of the DA to be the one that is proposing that limitation in terms of a vote of no confidence, whereas we know that in the previous parliaments and some of the councils across the country, they are the leaders in terms of submitting motions of no confidence. Even now in Johannesburg, they are putting a motion of no confidence. Even in Tshwane, they are doing the same thing. Now, it is hypocrisy of the DA and their sister party, the ANC. What is true is that the Constitution allows a motion of no confidence as a mechanism of holding the executive accountable. When the executive goes astray, a motion of no confidence, it is something that is permissible by the Constitution with the sole purpose of holding the executive accountable. Therefore, the Constitution does not place any limit to say a motion of no confidence must not be submitted, must be submitted within a time frame, simply because it knows that even if whoever is president is doing a good job and delivering services and fulfilling their mandate, they will enjoy the confidence of parties. But should they fail, that those presidents must be held accountable via a motion of no confidence. Therefore, we view what the DA is going to do as a violation of Section 102, and we are even more surprised, we are even more shocked that they even want to amend the Constitution. They do not even want to amend the Constitution for things that benefit the people, such as the land question, such as the transformation of the economy. They are obsessed about amending the Constitution for something so that the ones that are in power are protected from being held accountable. We as the ATM were very unhappy about that stance.
ATM President Vuyo Zungula, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for speaking to us.